What a difference 100 years can make. Looking back through the scope of history, 100 years is not that long. But while doing some research regarding a find I made in Antarctica, I stumbled across this picture. This is the very first aircraft carrier the U.S. ever put to sea. It's the USS Langley. And one of the things that this particular craft had on it would absolutely blow your mind. It wouldn't make any sense to a modern, rational naval officer. But back then, it made perfect sense. We're going to get into this, but I, of course, want to be diligent and say thank you to everyone who has continued to join us over at the Florida Maquis Patreon channel. $1 per month, that's it. Lowest allowable level, fully refundable first 90 days, gloves off content regarding all sorts of different topics. We're going to have a brand new one coming up early next week that I think a lot of you are going to be interested in. But I don't want to waste a whole lot of your guys' time today. I want to show you this picture again. The very first aircraft carrier we ever had, 1922. The USS Langley, CV-1. Now, you ready for this? This part is going to blow your mind. Third paragraph down, under aircraft carrier. An unusual feature of Langley was provision for a carrier pigeon house on the stern between the 5-inch guns. Pigeons had been carried aboard seaplanes for message transport since World War I and were to be carried on aircraft operated from Langley. The pigeons were trained at the Norfolk Naval Shipyard while Langley was undergoing conversion. As long as the pigeons were released a few at a time for exercise, they returned to the ship. But when the whole flock was released while Langley was anchored off Tangier Island, the pigeons flew south and roosted in the cranes of the Norfolk shipyard. The pigeons never went to sea again, and the former pigeon house became the XO's quarters. But the early plans for conversion of Lexington and Saratoga included compartments for pigeons. For pigeons. Now, some have looked at some of the satellite findings that I have revealed using Google Earth Pro on this channel and said, Maquis, I think you're a little bit crazy. The U.S. Navy put carrier pigeons on aircraft carriers for communications purposes only 100 years ago. If that doesn't show you how far we've come and what could be possible and what reality could be, I don't know what else will. Some have asked Florida Maquis, is there any new information about Antarctica or these strange craft that we're seeing in our skies? You know what I think the truth is, guys? I think many governments have gone down there, and the things that they have found have been so bizarre and so hard to explain that they've come to the conclusion that if we tell them the truth, they won't believe us anyway. They'll think we're nuts. Because there could be things down there that just don't make any sense. For example, like an aircraft carrier with carrier pigeons. Can you imagine anything more insane? Well, it was reality 100 years ago. And there's all sorts of things that went on in this country 100 years ago that, if you look back at it now, you would think we're absolutely crazy. You know what the new most controversial thing was in 1922 in North America? Women voting. They had just gotten the right to vote, and it was seen as incredibly scandalous and controversial. Some ask Florida Maquis, with this image that he put together, this picture of Jamie Murray, the actress from the series Defiance, playing Stamatar, what's this all about? The series Defiance covered something in science fiction that no other series dared to. Hygiene and bathing. You see, even a castle from the 15th century, and this does have to do with Antarctica and some things we found down there, had a better plan for sanitation than this base would. See, we see images like this of these frozen bases on planets like Hoth, or even like here in Antarctica. But you'd have to ask yourself a question. What's their plan for normal sanitation, things that we take for granted and have taken for granted since the 1950s? Every home in America is attached to, most, I'd say 99.999995% of homes in America are attached to some type of a sanitary sewer system. How would that work down here? It would be critical infrastructure, but how would that work down here? I mean, imagine you're on this little craft right here that's getting ready to land, and you've come in and, wow, this is really great. Look at all this advanced stuff, all this stuff meant to explore the universe and high-tech stuff. And you get off the craft and you walk in. It's like, man, you know what? Just point me to the facilities real quick, and I would love to get on with the tour and, get read in on all this super high-tech stuff. You know what they would probably do? Be like, well, we couldn't really dig a sewer system, but underground, underneath the rock down there, there's some places where volcanic heat has melted the ice, and there are these fast-flowing tunnels that wish the water away. So we all just kind of go down there and do whatever we have to do, and the water kind of takes everything away. You'd be mortified. Most North Americans would be absolutely mortified at this idea. They'd be like, are you crazy? You have the ability to create all of these incredible craft, anti-gravity craft, and things that can outrun F-15 jets and flying saucers, all this kind of stuff. But the simple, basic idea of sanitation on a large scale is beyond you. Now, here's the part that's going to really mess with some people's heads. The reason that might be is simple priorities. Most folks, if they walked into a house and, whether they were invited there for whatever reason, they went to use the facilities, and they saw a bidet next to the toilet, they think, wow, this place is pretty high class. I mean, look at this. Wow, it's got the giant big sensor on the wall here, and, there's no tank, and, this is a lot nicer than most North Americans. The basic idea is the same. The technology to create a bidet is 1940s, 1950s, maybe earlier. But you see, in the series Defiance, and I know it's just sci-fi, but they're the only one that ever talked about it. Even Star Trek and Stargate never dealt with this idea of sanitation, bathing, and hygiene. You see, everybody wants to talk about the sexy stuff. How does this craft fly, and what kind of weapons could it have, and, what are the specs of it and all this. There might be things down in Antarctica that they find they can't explain, and they don't even want to try to begin to. And I have a great example for this. In North America, people spend $300 on an electric toothbrush. Not everyone, but some do. $500 on an electric shaver. This is a Panasonic Arc 6. And $239 on a hairdryer. While 100 years ago, this is what was getting people by at sea and in different places away from technology. Imagine if we had had a different priority in this country, or any country had had a different priority about exploration and what was and was not important. You see, we stopped exploiting whales a long time ago in favor of petroleum, but who knows? Who knows what could have come from exploring different technologies in a different way? We are in a state right now in the world that billions suffer from poor access to water, sanitation. I know a lot of people are like, what does this have to do with Antarctica? Stick with me. Stick with me. In Africa, there are more people that know how to use smartphones than know how to use a commode. Wait, what? Yeah, that's right. In Africa, there are more people that know how to use smartphones than know how to use a commode. And they may never see a commode in their entire life, but they'll have an iPhone. So what does that have to do with anything? Well, if we have that kind of disparity now, okay, here's the key. Here's where the rubber meets the road. If we have that kind of disparity now in the modern world, who's to say that if there was some great disaster that hit Antarctica at some point in the past, there couldn't have been that kind of disparity down there? Where you had, for example, giants running around with loincloths and bows and arrows and spears on the same continent, where there were things like tic-tac craft and flying saucers. The disparity, not only just across one continent, but across time, could have left behind things and artifacts that are just inexplicable to those who are finding them. Just like in this country, only 100 years ago, we had aircraft carriers that had flying pigeons with little rolled up pieces of parchment attached to their legs, communicating as communications devices. Only 100 years ago. In this country, they even have smartphones in Africa now. We didn't even have that 100 years ago. But in this country, we have basic sanitation as something that's so ubiquitous that most people just forget about it. It's everywhere. But if you went to Antarctica, it would be nowhere. And trying to create some type of a system would be a huge heavy lift to create basic sanitation as we know it. But it would be a lot easier down there too, and they have set up science stations and study theoretical physics while still basically using outhouses. Think about that for just a minute. Studying theoretical physics and astronomy and advanced biology and geology while using outhouses. Does that make any sense in the real world? Of course it doesn't. You see, that's the crazy part. So I found something new down here, and I know we're almost 13 minutes in, but it's just so unbelievable that I had to kind of set things up to make people kind of entertain the idea of believing the unbelievable. Now, this is just a normal mountain range, but when you zoom in close here, there is definitely the skeletal remains of something laying here on the ice. This is definitely a spinal column, ribs, some type of a skull. I'll give you the location for this. You can download Google Earth Pro for yourself, and you can go there and look at it. It's in the 2014 layer. And this reminds me a great deal of another set of remains that we found way over here, a long time back. Whoop, wrong one. Hold on. Let's see if we can get the right layer here. Here we go, in this crevasse. Very strange crevasse, by the way. If you flip this around to southern aspect, you see something that looks very close to this. You've got the upper jaw, lower jaw, you got the skull here, the eye, the spine. You can see the kind of like a front flipper right here. And then the body. Let's measure this real quick. Based on what you can see here, about 70 feet long. So the size of a pretty large whale. So not out of the realm of possibility. Maybe we can go back and look at that other one and measure that. I don't think it was quite that long. So I know it took us a long time to get here, but this idea of finding absolutely crazy things in Antarctica, I don't think we can dismiss, because there are crazy things that are going on in our world right now. And even if, like I said, you go back only 100 years, those people would have looked at us like we're nuts, like we're absolutely insane. And looking back at them and how they believed and they acted, we would say the same thing. There's people out there that were alive 100 years ago who lived during both times. All right, this is about 110 feet, something like that. I'm just kind of ballparking here to we'll just say about 100 feet. For those of you in Europe, about 31 meters, roughly. So, I mean, you're right. Who knows what this is? If anything at all, but that's kind of the point. That's kind of the point. It might seem crazy now looking at satellite images, but imagine the idea. Not knowing how to use a commode, never seeing indoor plumbing, not even knowing what a bidet is, much less how to use it, but being a master of using a smartphone. Does that make sense in anybody's world? And like I said, 100 years ago, whale product, anything and everything was actually sought after for a great many things. Whale oil soap, butter, the fat, the blubber, the bone needles. In the lower left is plant food, candles, clock oils. They've even used whale lubricants in car transmissions. 100 years ago, no big deal. Now, people be like, "Are you crazy? What are you? Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're using." People would freak out. And imagine 100 years ago, something to blow warm air to dry your hair, $239. Something to shave your face with titanium blades and circuit boards and everything else, $500. There were people back then that didn't make $500 a year. An electric to brush your teeth, which most people didn't do 100 years ago, by the way. $300. If you would have told them that in 100 years, people would be buying these highly advanced devices that had to be plugged into the wall to brush teeth, they would have said you were crazy. They would have said you were nuts. You know, you see pictures like this from the series Defiance, and everybody gets a good chuckle out of it, the communal hot tub bathing family, whatever. It is kind of funny, though, that if, let's say, a family had a hot tub in their backyard, if everybody went out and jumped in the hot tub and was enjoying the hot tub, nobody would think much of it. But if it was inside and the family was bathing together in the inside tub, that would be seen as wildly inappropriate. I've seen people go to a hotel where they have a giant hot tub, and there's people you don't even know, and you jump in the hot tub with them, and that's fine. But in your own privacy of your own home, anything more than occupancy one for bathing, other than perhaps a married couple, would be seen as, ooh, no, that's just ew. Do you see the weirdness? And like I said, a bidet is, well, not 100 years old. Well, it might be the technology close to 100 years old, yet almost nobody has them. And if you did have one, you'd be saying, wow, that's pretty highbrow. Compared to a $500 razor, electric shaver, this is just literally just another commode with pressurized water. You see, this doesn't seem all that impressive now, does it? Comparatively speaking, this is how the Romans, by the way, dealt with plumbing issues. In many ways, they were more advanced 2,000 years ago when it came to these issues than even the Europeans were in the 1500s. See, this is something that people they look through in society, and modern North American society, we don't even think about it. But anywhere else in the world, like even South America and Africa, or if we were going to go to Antarctica, we would have to start from the ground up. You see, in Africa, they're skipping the entire 20th century. In Africa, they are skipping the entire 20th century. They're going right from the 19th century, outhouses and low sanitation and farming, and they're jumping right from that right to iPhones. Everything that was achieved in North America as far as advancements in sanitation and social sciences, that's all getting skipped. All getting skipped. And that would, I guess, necessarily be the case for those who would want to go to Antarctica. Because what would you have to do? You'd have to wait for the warming to do its thing, to create areas where you could even begin to try to plan for a city where you would put in a storm sewer, put in a sanitary sewer system, and then the roads and everything else that you would have to lay down first before you could then start to even think about building buildings and having people living there and all the other things. Which, I'm going backwards through the images here, but maybe I should have gone through them this way to begin with. It makes a little bit more sense. Even a 16th century castle with surrounding town, these folks would have had a better plan for long-term survival than we would have right now going to Antarctica. They have clearly some flowing water in and around the moat, so they would have a way to at least keep things somewhat sanitary. So I guess I will leave it there, but thank you everyone for joining us. I'm definitely keeping an eye on Antarctica and trying to find new stuff for you guys. But if you go through the Antarctica playlist, there's a lot of stuff that we found that I haven't dealt with directly, at least not in a long time. So anyway, that picture's way upper right over here, the one we covered today. And also thank you to everyone who continues to join us over at Patreon. We're going to continue through the holidays to bring you guys the very best, cutting edge, no censorship content. Because we're getting into a time now, folks, where we're going to have to talk like adults to survive. It's not going to be a luxury anymore. So I'll leave it there. God bless. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.